As of the evening of the 22nd of May, Russian occupation forces are continuing to focus their main efforts on the Kupiansk, Lyman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka and Marinka fronts. Fighting for the city of Bakhmut continues. Source: General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Facebook. Information is of 1800 on the 22nd of May. Quote from the General Staff: over the course of the day, a total of 25 meeting engagements occurred on the aforementioned fronts, i.e., the Kupiansk, Lyman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka and Marinka fronts, ed. Bakhmut and Marinka remain at the epicenter of hostilities. Details: the operational situation on the Volyn and Polissia fronts remains much the same as before. There is no evidence that Russia is forming new offensive units in the area. On the Sivershchyna and Slobozhanshchyna fronts, Russian forces are continuing to maintain their presence in areas near the Russian-Ukrainian border. Throughout the day, they deployed mortars and artillery to fire on Tymonovychi, Halahanivka and Zarichchia, Chernihiv Oblast, Hodyne, Hirky, Budky, Katerynivka, Tymofiivka and Oleksandrivka, Sumy Oblast, and Morozova Dolyna, Shevchenka, Kozacha Lopan, Hoptivka, Lukiantsi, Zelene, Starytsia, Hatyshche, Pletenivka, Vovchansk, Varvarivka, Nestern, Budarky and Chuhunivka, Kharkiv Oblast. On the Kupiansk front, Russian forces conducted airstrikes on areas in and around Orleans, Kyslivka and Tymofiivka, Kharkiv Oblast. They deployed mortars and artillery to fire on Kupiansk, Fyholivka, Novomlinsk, Vorokna, Zapadna, Kupiansk, Husinka, Tymofiivka and Berestov, Kharkiv Oblast, and Stelmakivka, Luhansk Oblast. On the Lyman front, Russian aircraft struck areas in the vicinity of Bilohorivka, Luhansk Oblast, and Verkhnekamiansk, Donetsk Oblast, and shelled several frontline civilian settlements, including Nevsky and Bilohorivka, Luhansk Oblast, and Torsky, Vesel and Spern, Donetsk Oblast. Russian forces are continuing to carry out offensive operations on the Bakhmut front. Fighting for the city of Bakhmut continues. Russian aircraft struck areas in and around Ivanovsky and Bakhmut. Vashukivka, Orikovo-Vasilivka, Markov, Hurahorivka, Bakhmut, Ivanovsky, Stupochki, Bila Hora, Teresk, Pivnikny, Pivden and New York Donetsk Oblast came under Russian fire. Russian forces attempted to advance on Novokulinov and Vodyne on the Avdiivka front, but were unsuccessful. Over the course of the day, Russian aircraft struck areas in and around Avdiivka and Pervomaysk. Russian forces also shelled Novokulinov, Berdychi, Avdiivka, Vodyne, Pervomaysk and Kharlivka, Donetsk Oblast. On the Marinka front, Ukraine's defense forces once again repelled numerous Russian assaults near the city of Marinka. Russian forces shelled the village of Pobeda in Donetsk Oblast. Over the course of today, Russian forces did not undertake offensive operations on the Shakhtarsk front, though they conducted airstrikes on areas in and around Vuhledar, Prekostivka and Zolotaniva, and shelled Vuhledar, Novokranka and Prekostivka. Russian forces are on the defensive on the Zaporizhia and Kherson fronts, but they continue to attack civilian infrastructure and frontline settlements. Over the course of today, they conducted airstrikes on areas in and around Mala Takhmachka and Novodanilivka, Zaporizhia Oblast, and shelled Ramivka and Novopil, Donetsk Oblast, Olhaivsky, Huliaipol, Bilahiria, Mala Takhmachka, Novodanilivka, Novoandriivka, Mali Sherbaki and the city of Zaporizhia, Zaporizhia Oblast, and Havrilivka, Berislav, Vesel, Kozatsky, Burhunka, Antonivka, Velitensk and the city of Kherson, Kherson Oblast. Over the course of today, Ukrainian aircraft carried out 8 airstrikes on areas where Russian military personnel and equipment were concentrated and 2 on Russian anti-aircraft missile systems. Ukraine's defense forces downed a Russian Mi-24 attack helicopter and a reconnaissance drone. Units of Ukraine's rocket forces and artillery struck 3 areas where Russian military personnel and equipment were concentrated, 3 ammunition storage points, 11 field artillery units, and a radar. General Staff: Bakhmut remains epicenter of fighting. There were 25 clashes between Ukrainian and Russian forces along the front line on May 22, including Bakhmut, the General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces reported in its evening update. Bakhmut and Marinka remain the epicenter of fighting, according to the General Staff. After a 10-month-long siege, Wagner mercenary group founder Yevgeny Prigozhin claimed complete control of Bakhmut on May 21. The Kyiv Independent reported on May 22 that Bakhmut had effectively been occupied by Russian troops. While it has yet to be confirmed by the Ukrainian government, it is evident based on both official statements and those made by soldiers on the ground to the Kyiv Independent. However, Ukrainian forces are still engaged in combat around Bakhmut, Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Maliar reported on May 22. Ukrainian forces seem to be gaining initiative on the flanks of the city, threatening to encircle the occupying Russian forces. Additionally, the General Staff wrote on May 22 that Ukrainian forces carried out 8 airstrikes on May 22 in areas with concentrations of Russian forces and military equipment, as well as 2 airstrikes against anti-aircraft missile complexes. 3 areas with concentrations of Russian military equipment, 3 ammunition depots, 11 artillery systems, and a radar station were hit. The Russian way of war. Drone footage from Bakhmut, Mariupol, Homs, and Aleppo looks eerily alike. The Russian military has a war-fighting playbook that involves devastating cities, and it is being used in Ukraine to horrifying ends. Drone footage taken of Bakhmut, a city in eastern Ukraine that has been the epicenter of intense and bloody fighting for months, captures an urban sprawl in utter ruins, a once thriving town that's been completely flattened by ceaseless bombing and shelling. It's a shocking but familiar sight nearly 15 months into Russia's full-scale war against its neighbor. The current scenes in Bakhmut resemble Russia's deadly siege of the southern port city of Mariupol last year, and this Russian tactic of inflicting complete destruction isn't new. Russia did the same thing in Syria, helping the Assad regime in its years-long civil war. Bakhmut, which has been the site of the war's longest battle, has been all but obliterated, with most of its residents gone and buildings reduced to rubble. Satellite images from Maxar Technologies and drone footage captured from various news agencies show a scarred landscape with the occasional plume of smoke, a stark contrast to what the city used to look like. The fighting is fierce on both sides. The enemy switched to the so-called Syrian scorched earth tactics. Colonel General Alexander Sirsky, a Ukrainian military commander, said of Russia's relentless and brutal efforts to capture the city in April. They destroy buildings and positions with airstrikes and artillery fire. Bakhmut's defense continues. Russian forces now claim to have fully seized the bombed-out city, though Ukraine has disputed the purported victory. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Sunday that the Russians have not yet fully occupied the city. But he also noted that there is nothing left of Bakhmut. "You have to understand that there is nothing," he said. "They destroyed everything. There are no buildings. It's a pity. It's tragedy. But for today, Bakhmut is only in our hearts."